Hello, super friends, and welcome back to another episode of Superhero Saturday, where we talk about the arts of superheroes, storytelling, and so much more. My name is Annie, and here's what happened last time. At my last recording session, I sat down and talked about superhero naming conventions. Well, superhero and supervillain naming conventions. And when I popped the SD card out of the camera and put it in my computer, I realized that I had recorded over 45 minutes worth of footage. That's a lot. That's 3 videos worth. And there were 3 different video topics that I tried to cover in one 15-minute video. I guess it should be no surprise to anyone that I could talk about superheroes for hours and hours and hours. But I was surprised. So what I decided I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the footage from that first recording session and kind of break it up over the next 2 episodes, this one and the next one, and we'll get a whole bunch about superhero naming conventions in one whole month period. And so I know that there are a lot of great names out there and a lot of not so great names out there. So if you're looking to avoid some of the common pitfalls that may happen when coming up with your own super character names and team names, then keep watching this video because we are gonna get into it and help you to get a really great name for yourself. So with that out of the way, let's get started. The first mistake that often gets made is that the name is just too common. If it's too simple or too short or too straightforward, sometimes the name is just not memorable enough to stick in the reader's mind. It's easy to fall into the trap of trying to follow the, Disney Pixar naming convention where, they had Tangled and then they had Coco, and then they have Frozen. They just pick like one word of 2 syllables to try and capture everything. And yes, everybody knows what those things are, but that's because those companies are so big and their advertising is everywhere, it's kind of impossible to ignore. In a world where there are so many different superhero stories and different superhero genre character naming conventions that fall into the same category, sometimes it can be hard to find a name that makes sense with your character that isn't just, the first thing that you think about. Because there might be 5 different characters that are using that cryptonym. And you don't want your character to get lost in the pages. A good way around that is just to, again, mix a couple of these naming conventions together to get something a little bit more interesting. For me, I did this with my own original superhero, whose name is Cannonball Cooper. There is actually another superhero character out there called Cannonball. He's from the X-Men, and he has fairly similar powers to my own character, and I wanted to distinguish that a little bit, so by adding Cooper's last name to his cryptonym, it kind of gives it something a little bit different, and it even gives us a bonus little bit of alliteration with the double C. On the other hand, another common mistake is that people will give their characters names that are just too long to be remembered. Yes, it's good to mix things together, but things are easy to remember if they're just between, like 2 or 4 syllables, maybe not too much more. For example, if I was to say Secret Agent Peggy Carter, that's 4 words. That's quite a bit of page space to use for her character's name. But Captain Carter is short, catchy, alliterative. It's great! But no spoilers yet, because I haven't seen the What If show yet. I really need to get on that. To kind of follow along with that, the next mistake that happens pretty often is giving a character a name that is like some kind of random alien made-up language that just is difficult to read, much less try to pronounce or remember how it's said. I could name a character Bashana, but if a reader can't see that repeatedly or hear that repeatedly and recognize any part of that, then it's gonna be really hard for them to remember and tell their friends about this cool character that they found. However, there's a little bit of difference here that I wanna point out, because when I was doing my research, I found that a lot of people were saying that you shouldn't name your characters something that is in a language outside of the language that you're using. Something that is maybe a little bit more challenging for, say, English speakers to try and pronounce. Like if you're using a name like Pierre, it's in French, technically, it's a French name, but it's common enough in English that would be okay. But if I tried to name them something like Witsapodalotl, then that might not be such a good idea. But I don't want to discourage you from using some kind of name in a different language that makes sense for your character and makes sense for the name. It's like meeting someone from a different country and trying to learn their name. Yeah, you might not be a natural at their language, but that doesn't mean that you should give them some kind of English-sounding nickname just to get around the fact that you can't pronounce it very well at the first try. Learn people's names, okay? I will say, though, that there probably is a good balance between naming your character whatever you want and naming them something that's at least a little bit accessible. So for your own creations, I would just say find kind of your happy balance. Whatever you think is comfortable with naming your character, go ahead and do it. And your readers will figure it out. There's no need to dumb it down for them. And the last mistake that I want to talk about is just having too many different nicknames for your characters. For example, a character might be called a whole bunch of different things by their friends, their family members, their enemies, their co-workers, the news people. A character could be called Mom, Diane, Baby, and Super Solstice, all in the same story. But if you're throwing around too many different nicknames, like for Batman, he is the Dark Knight, the Caped Crusader, and all of these kind of things, if you shove all of those different nicknames up front right away, then your readers and audience members might be a little bit confused about what your character actually is called, or if you're talking about, multiple characters at the same time. Especially in the beginning, you want to kind of solidify a few, probably no more than 3 different names for your character to be called, and kind of stick with one that is probably going to be the most common, rather than giving them a whole bunch of nicknames from a bunch of different sources. While that might be realistic because a lot of people can hear and deduce a lot of different things from a lot of different circumstances, it just is a little bit easier for your reader to identify with a hero that has one clear name, or a villain, or a side character, or what have you. The only thing that I'll really say about teams of characters is that when you're naming them different names, you may want to distinguish them a little bit further from each other by using different first letters for each of their names. And the reason that I'm saying this is because if there is an audience member, say, reading some kind of content about your characters, it's going to be a little bit harder for them to distinguish if all of your characters' names start with the same letter. For example, if one character's name is John and the other character's name is Jim and another character's name is Jake, then when they're skimming through, they may see a J and just skip on through and be like, wait, who am I talking about again? It's much better to mix it up just a little bit, like say John and Kim and Blake. That way you can see the different letters, kind of separating them, and it just gives your audience a little bit of an extra ease of access to get to those different characters' names faster. So there you have it. Those are the top common mistakes that I see when naming different superhero characters in the superhero genre. Do you have any favorite examples of some naming conventions kind of gone wrong, with some favorite bad examples? Or do you have another example of a mistake that you see pretty often that hasn't made this list? Go ahead and pop those down in the comments below and we'll continue the conversation there. And thanks so much for watching, Super Friends. If you enjoyed, go ahead and give us a big thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more superheroic content every single Saturday. You can join the team by following us on social media and by supporting us over on Patreon, where you can get exclusive behind-the-scenes content, books, and merchandise. And if you go over to our website at www.fearless9.com, you can pick up some of those books for yourself and see my own superhero characters in action. Thanks again for watching, Super Friends, and we'll see you next week.